Dave, are you ready to get started?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. All right, then we'll go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for our College Bound webinar. I am Allie Serbaugh, and I am the Marketing Director at Sterling Financial Management. I have with us Dave Neterer, one of our advisors and the president and owner of Sterling Financial Management, who has already gone through this process with his sons. So in addition to being a financial advisor, he also is a parent like the rest of us, and knows and understands this process. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave and let us know, throughout this webinar, if anybody has any questions. There's a lot of content to cover, and so we will try to go through it as quickly as we can to be mindful of your time.
Thank you, Allie, and thank you guys for joining us tonight. Feel free to, if you guys want to jump in along the way to ask your questions, go ahead and do that. If you want to save them to the end, that's fine as well. So tonight we're talking about college planning, college bound. We've kind of kicked around whether we should separate the savings aspect, best ways to save versus, as you get ready to enter college. Of course, a lot of us are dealing with FAFSA and what kind of aid we're going to get, and should we do loans and that kind of a thing. So this is mainly kind of focusing more on that preparation for college or getting ready for college, as opposed to best ways to save. But if you have any questions regarding that, let us know. So we'll jump right in here. So we would appreciate, so Allie will send out a survey here. We'd appreciate if you guys jump out, like us on Facebook. We're also on LinkedIn, both personal pages and our business pages. So we definitely would appreciate you guys following us out there. Helps our search engine optimization. Is that what we call it, Allie? So very good. All right. So hopefully we've done a little bit of planning here, and we'll help you with a little bit more. Of course, crossing your fingers and jumping into college without much preparation usually doesn't go well. But so a lot of us are thinking, and of course hoping, that we're going to qualify for as much financial aid as possible. Of course, as we know, a lot of it is income based. But there isn't any magic formula here to say, well, if I make more than X amount of dollars, that I'm not going to qualify for aid. But I mean, probably suffice it to say, the higher your income, the less need-based aid that you're going to have out there. So with that, we hope our kids are all the smartest and brightest. And so, the merit-based, so the better they do in school, at least they may qualify for merit-based aid or aid, as opposed to financial need. So there is that. Just kind of separate those two kind of words in your mind: financial aid or need-based aid versus merit-based aid or merit-based aid. So we'll see some slides on that here later on. Some key terminologies: EFC. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before, but it's called the expected family contribution. So it's kind of a dollar figure, and it represents kind of a financial aid formula that's used. So the colleges use that EFC number to see what kind of aid you're going to qualify for college. So EFCs, there's a number of things that kind of go into that. The number of children that you have in college. So it's good and it's bad. So if you have 2 kids in college, you have twice the cost, but you can qualify for more aid the more kids you have in college. So the gross income of parents, and then, believe it or not, but there is the adjusted gross income of the student. So unfortunately, I feel like with college planning, it's almost like one of these things to where we feel like, well, the better more we save, the less aid we're going to get. And one of the things, the more that your kids make, which they need, right, to help pay for some of the schooling in a lot of cases, that can also affect their aid. Assets of parents and student, we're going to see later on. A lot of us, so a lot of people kind of have that misnomer in their mind that the more money I save, the less aid I'm going to get. And although that's true, only about 5% of whatever you save goes towards counting towards that the expected family contribution. So we'll see some slides on that later on. In fact, actually, this next slide that we're looking at here kind of comes into play. So, the Department of Education calculates that expected family contribution, and you guys can actually run through that if you want. It's College Board. You can go out there and plug your information in and kind of get an idea of what that expected family contribution number is. But so the college looks at that cost every year, subtracts kind of your expected financial contribution, and that helps determine the financial aid eligibility. So you can apply as early as October 1st. So you're going to apply on the FAFSA. There are about 200 schools, a lot of private institutions that use what's called a CSS formula. So we'll look at that, and there's a lot of slides on here that kind of talk about the differences between those two different formulas, the FAFSA and the CSS. So we'll look at that. So how do we calculate the EFC? Parents' assets. So if you look at that first kind of box there, so we look at income. So about 22 to 47% of adjusted gross income above a protected amount. So we'll see what that figure is here. Then we add in assets. So as we said, 5.6% of what we have saved goes to be used for that expected financial contribution there. Students, 50% of income above a protected amount, 6660, and then 20% of assets. So one of the things first kind of things to realize is that if you have out there money that you've saved in your kids' names through either UGMAs or UPMAs, which you're going to do because kids can't sign, can't be signers, and can't enter in the contracts. So money that they have count against aid much more than a parental asset. So definitely spend down kids' assets. Don't forget the FAFSA is a point in time. So it's the day that you sign that FAFSA is the date that they're asking for that counting of assets. So if you're going to fill out the form October 30th, make sure the kids don't have any money in their bank account on October 30th. So it's just one of those things that, so even losses, like, right now the market's down a little bit. Heaven forbid we have a crash in the investment market, go out there and fill out your FAFSA because your assets are going to be lower than in another time frame. So now the other thing is a lot of people, EFC is not necessarily the amount that your family will pay for college. Of course, it's used in that calculation. But if you subtract that EFC from the cost, that's kind of about what you would expect to kind of qualify for. So how things are counted. So here's just a little graph. I know this is very busy, but let's just take somebody. So what we're looking at here is on the far left-hand side of this little slide that we have here. Income has a much bigger impact than assets. So on the left-hand side is a projected income, just a hypothetical income figure. So let's pick out $100,000. If we have no assets saved, our EFC would be $15,800. Now, as we slide across there on the top part of our graph, that's kind of just a hypothetical savings. So if I'm making 100,000, but I have 100,000 saved, I really only increase my EFC there by about $5,000. Okay, so having money saved. So is it better to have 100,000 that you can use to help offset, to pay for college? Absolutely. So you don't want to save anything. It's always best to save if you can. So this just kind of gives you a rough calculation. So if you look at your combined income on that left-hand side, you know, you want to, if you kind of do a guesstimate on what you have in non-retirement assets. So IRAs are excluded from that. Retirement assets, if you own a small business, less than 100 employees, that's excluded. So, so those would just be non-retirement assets that you have saved. Gives you kind of an idea on that EFC. And like I said, you can, sorry, we had, I'm not sure, Stacy's a wiki, Allie, looked like she might have dropped out. So I'll have to watch it to see if she can let her back in. But all right, so, and like I said, you can find out your EFC. If you go out to College Board, you can do a little hypothetical there for that. So there's two, as we mentioned, there's two types of kind of EFC or formulas for that. So there's the federal one, so that's tied to the FAFSA. There's an institutional EFC. Like I said, there's 200 mostly private schools that are going to be used. So there could be a difference in the calculations there of that. So just be aware that there could be, and if you're seeing that CSS profile, that means that that would probably be a private school, usually the more expensive private schools. And they have a different way of kind of calculating how much money that EFC kind of calculation. All right, so we'll just give you a couple of EFC examples here. So we have a middle-class family, husband and wife, maybe making $55,000. They got 15 grand in the bank. So they have one college freshman, they have another child, but not in school yet. So an expected EFC calculation here would be $2,577. The institutional method, $2,474. There we go. So I just let her back in there, Allie. So $2,474 would be the institutional calculation. So just be aware that there are two different methodologies for that. So how does that, you know, what would be the need-based aid? So if we look at maybe a private college, 60 grand, subtract that from your EFC, that would be considered a demonstrated financial need. Okay, so let's we'll give you another example here. Husband and wife, 150,000, 120,000 in investments. The equity in the home. So when you see that home equity, kind of triggers in my mind. I'm thinking loan, but it's the amount of equity that you have in your house. So if your house is fully paid off and it's worth 250,000, yeah, I did. Okay. Then, so that's the equity in the home. So we'll look at an EFC on this one. The expected financial contribution, 31,000. The institutional method, so brings in a student's contribution in there, and so a little bit more contribution from that. We didn't look at, haven't looked at school yet. Okay, so then we're going to add a second child. So look at how much their EFC dropped. So just one extra, so two kids in college drops their expected financial contribution almost in half. So pretty strong tie to the number of children that you have in school. So this gives you kind of a graph or chart. So I guess you would have had to been very prolific to get 4 kids in school, either that or maybe a second marriage or something like that. But 4 kids in school, you drops your EFC by almost 75%. So the more kids in college, the more aid you're going to get. So some things to kind of keep in mind is that as you begin to look for colleges, is that colleges, you need to look for, colleges will tell you, and there's information out there from the colleges on whether they're going to give you, whether they give out a lot of need-based aid or whether they give out a lot of merit aid. And so kind of what we see happening is the very popular schools that tend to get a lot of applications and are maybe very tough to get into tend to give out a lot of need-based aid, but not very much in merit-based aid. And so kind of the theory behind that is that, the popular colleges that have big endowments are able to give a lot of need-based aid, but the more well-to-do families that are trying to get into those colleges that have maybe very little need-based aid are able to pay for the colleges. So the college is like, well, we're not going to give merit-based aid because you can expect to pay, whether that's true or not. But so that's kind of the general theory behind that. So small expected. So if your EFC number is very small, you need to kind of look for colleges that are more generous with some of their need-based aid. The opposite is that if you can afford the college, so you have a very large expected financial contribution, you need to look for those colleges that give a lot of merit-based aid. Now, if you're Ali Serbaugh, her whole family goes to Tennessee, everyone's going to go to Tennessee. She may be not much that Ali can do with that one. All of her kids are going to go to Tennessee, whether they like it or not. So, all right. So EFC. So how do we? So if you go here, you can generate this. So the College Board has a lot of really good information out there. So if you go to this Big Future College Board, or you just search this College Board out there, I think it was like the second thing that came up when I Googled it. You can go out there and kind of plug your information in and see what your EFC number would be. So that's a very, very good site. Also, once you get your award letter back, so let's say you're ready to go to college and you filed your application, or you've sent your information out to 3 or 4 colleges, you will get an award letter. So if you look at the bottom of that award letter, you'll find that EFC number. And so, you can't really evaluate that, kind of how good of an award that is without that EFC number. But you also have to watch as you're doing searches out there to find out, what the average person gets for college. You've got to watch. If you look in this middle box, sometimes they'll put loans and things in there. They'll put in there the maximum loans and not just the merit-based awards or grants that you might be eligible for. So they might come out and say, well, the average award letter is $30,000, but that could include a lot of loans. So if you look at this, you got to watch how they kind of package that, and what your final costs are with that. So they get a little bit tricky on how they advertise those numbers. Okay, so sources of financial aid. So federal government has some out there for us. We've got a slide later on that's got a few of those, like the Pell Grant is a very common one. Sometimes states, colleges, nonprofits, banks, and other credit unions. I also found this to kind of be when they talk about the number of scholarships out there, my oldest son did a fabulous job applying. I think he applied to 25 different ones and ended up getting one scholarship. So I don't know who's getting all the scholarships out there, but they seem to be very difficult to get. And normally it's just the local ones that you have some type of an affiliation or have worked with, unfortunately, in the past. But as we had mentioned, savings never hurts, right? So the more you have saved, the better off you're going to be. So definitely, but the FAFSA and the CSS profile can sometimes treat the assets a little differently. The biggest one is the equity in your home, but there are a few other differences out there. Don't forget that the FAFSA formula ignores IRAs, SEPs, 401k. So don't make the mistake when they ask for assets. You are and you can exclude those. If you go on right now and you just wanted to even kind of prepare, you can print out this FAFSA. So this FAFSA is out for the 22-23 school year already. So you can go out to that PDF, print that baby off, and kind of begin to read through it. And so there's a few certain things that are excluded from that FAFSA. I think so. If you didn't hear in the beginning, we will send out these slides to you later on. And so they'll have these links in there to that so that you can copy those babies down. As we said, FAFSA doesn't count the equity in your home, but it does treat, vacation homes, rental properties, those are included in that. And so just watch on there when they're talking about the assets. This is kind of a common one that sometimes trips people up a little bit. Boy, it created a big problem for me when my kids were applying. We answered one form wrong that we had to spend writing letters for like 9 months to try and get this thing straightened out. But FAFSA uses what they call a custodial parent. Now, what does that mean? So a custodial parent is one is who the child has lived with during the majority of the time. So the 12-month period ending on the day the FAFSA is filed. So what's not relevant to that is who claims the child on taxes or who pays for the child support. So, you could have a situation where mom's a physician, so making a hefty salary. Maybe the ex-husband is a high school teacher. So if you want to reduce college costs and maybe get more need-based aid, and if it makes sense to do this, but so the child living with the father for 6 months and a day, that makes him the custodial parent. Him being the lower income, they would qualify for more need-based aid. So, and as we said, who claims that the child doesn't make a difference. So, and count household size correctly. So stepchildren, if a step parent provides more than half of their support, even if they live elsewhere, the custodial parent providing half of that, more than half the support there. Okay, so CSS profile, here's the differences there: home equity, adjusted net worth of a family business or farm, and some non-qualified annuities, and sometimes life insurance and cash value. But as we said, very seldom, we haven't had any clients kind of have to deal with this CSS profile. But just be aware it is out there. It's approximately 200 schools, so not a big percentage there. So the CSS, as we said, brings in some of those things. You can see what might affect that EFC number based on the CSS profile. That's a little different than the FAFSA. All right. So, and as we mentioned there, CSS can also treat divorce a little bit differently. So in some cases, the CSS will bring in one of the non-custodial, essentially the non-custodial parent information can sometimes be required on that CSS. So if you are dealing with that, just be aware of if that's a situation, just be aware of what they're asking for and get some clarification on that. So here's just a little difference in some of the methodology in some different areas. So again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. If you guys are dealing with this, you'll have the slides later on. Just be aware there are some differences there in the methodology. Okay, so FAFSA and CSS profile both agree that assets need to be considered in aid formula. So as we had talked about, child assets, any non-retirement taxable investments that you have, even college accounts get counted in there. But don't forget, there's different percentages there for those different things. So, as we said, savings is always a good thing. So anytime you can put away a little bit of money, you can do that. In some cases, some folks are using Roth IRAs as a way to do that. So, you can borrow, or you can pull withdrawals sometimes from those if you're able to do that, and other assets, of course, that you set aside for college. We mentioned that every 10 grand, just based on the formula, only impacts you like $500. So, as we mentioned, it's a good thing to have some. It's a good thing to have some dollars put away. There's an asset protection allowance. Unfortunately, it's not very large, but if you have two parents, so it's based on an age, you guys can kind of see that sliding scale there. But basically what that means is on the FAFSA, it's going to ignore the first. So let's say you have a couple that are 50 years old. A couple is there, so FAFSA is going to ignore the first $7,000 of investment assets. But don't forget, as we said, only 5.6% of anything above that gets counted into the EFC. So as you can see here, there's in our example, we've got a couple that's that has saved $80,000. So if you subtract that $7,000 allowance, that brings it down to 73,000 multiplied times our 5.6. So the EFC with 80 grand in the 529 really only increased the EFC about 4,000. So, as we said, much better to have investments ready for college. So if all you've got is 8 grand, well, then that's going to have zero impact on your financial aid. CSS profile, just a little different. It assesses parent assets at 5% instead of the 5.6. So not really much of a difference there. As we mentioned, best to not have kids money in kids' names. So if you have the UGMA accounts, which are technically custodial. So a lot of times what parents do is, the kids get birthday money, or, they want to, hey, I'm starting to work. I just made $500, working for grandpa or grandma or whatever. And now it's time to open a bank account. You start accumulating some money inside of there. Again, don't forget 20% of that is counted against that and towards that EFC. So, a $5,000 saved for kids is going to increase the EFC by almost 1,000. And unfortunately, there's no asset protection in there for kids. So like I said, it's kind of frustrating. And I don't know, as a parent, you feel like, well, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. So, kind of a difficult situation there with trying to come up with savings and everything else. There is that income threshold again. So just, if you can, watch what kids make. Absolutely, if you can get money under the table, right? Cash money under the table. One nice thing though is work study and co-op doesn't count in the aid formula. So, about the only way kind of around that. So we mentioned custodial accounts. The best thing is if you can move those to a 529. The custodial 529 is considered a parent asset. That is one of the benefits of a 529. So that in our example of 10 grand in a child's name instead of 2 grand increasing expected financial contribution, if you move that to a 529, it's now parent asset. Now it only affects 500. So you just saved yourself $1,500 there by moving custodials into the UGMA into the custodial 529 is a good thing. All right, so hopefully we've all got very wealthy grandparents out there. So how do we avoid jeopardizing need-based aid? So there is, I think it's question 44. on the FAFSA 44I, it asks on that FAFSA, was any money received or paid on your behalf and not reported elsewhere on the form? So that means, did grandpa, grandma happen to give me money that could be used for school? And, was it used towards that, or did I receive that? And so it's got to be reported on the FAFSA. So how do we do that? Well, the FAFSA is based on, so if I'm going to apply for college let's say I'm filling my FAFSA out by October of this year for my child going to college next year, they're looking at the tax returns from 2 years previous. And I've got a good slide in there that'll help you to kind of think through that. So so grandparents can give starting in in the spring of their junior year, because if you think about it, you're filling out that FAFSA for 2 years ago, so it's not going to pick up those things. So have grandparents hold off until the junior year. And so even if you've got to accumulate some loans, then you can go to grandparents, and grandparents can help to pay off those loans. So you got to watch when monies are received by the kids, or when the grandparents give it. You can change ownership on the 529s to parents. So we have a lot of grandparents that start 529s for their kids, or like I said, grandparents can contribute to the 529. So as a parent, if you want to start one up, have grandpa and grandma contribute directly into that 529 for you. All right, so big influencers on financial aid. So we already talked about income being a significant part. Parental non-retirement assets include the 529, number of kids in college. And then as we looked at kids' assets and income, and then grandparent donations, we'd mentioned all kind of have big impacts. So, is there any ways to help boost financial aid? There's not a whole lot. And unfortunately, it's just a lot of marginal things that we can tweak. So, as I look down through the list here of things, so kind of what this is saying is, again, paying attention to the calendar year. So, we all like to get bonuses. So do I want to tell my employer, hey, don't give me a bonus this year, give it to me 2 years down the road? I don't know. Exercising stock options, if you have the ability for that. As we mentioned, the timing of when you're converting those custodial accounts to the 529. We have helped some clients do that. So the timing of that can sometimes be kind of tricky based on that. So this slide that we have in here, I picked this one up from JP Morgan. I just thought it was very helpful. So, if we start there as a freshman, and I know this is old years, but you can kind of get an idea. So maybe go to our senior year here. So we're going to file the FAFSA in 2022. Right? So we would file that October of 2022. I'm not going to college till 2023 and 24. So the tax return that we're going to be looking at is going to be the 2021 tax return. So just be aware of that. This little slide here will help you to kind of think through those dates and what information they're going to be asking for. So again, if there's any way for us to kind of control when things hit our taxes, if we, capital gains, like don't sell that stock this year, or something like that. If there's things that you can do to help control those capital gains, maybe offset capital gains with losses, things like that. But like I said, they seem to be very marginal things. So, unfortunately, not a whole lot we can do. Now, I mentioned early on, be strategic when filing your financial aid forms. So they don't care. They're not asking for a 6-month average of your bank account. They just want to know what's in the bank account on the day you file that, what's in my investment account the day you file that. So if you've got some big bills that you can pay to pay that stuff down, withdraw it in cash and stick it in your safe, whatever. But they're asking it the day you file is the day that they're looking for that information. So again, have your kids pay bills, get the money out of the kids' account, what have you, whatever you've got to do to kind of help do that. Also, if your kids, let's say you've got a lot of accumulation in there for kids, go ahead and spend the child's money first, and then move on to maybe some of your dollars. So make sure you apply for aid early. So I would recommend filling out that FAFSA almost as quickly as you can. So the earlier you get it filled out, the better it's going to be. I think the more opportunity schools will have to look at that to be able to get you an award letter and help you to be able to make some decisions there between different schools. A lot of kids, my kids were like this. They were like, well, what if I just become an independent student? Unfortunately, it's about impossible to do that. So, you got to be 24 years or old. If your child's ready to get married, in the military or military vet, sometimes grad school or foster care, an award of the court, so it's very, very difficult, unfortunately. So clients, so children, a lot of times it's very difficult to become independent. So just because they're in their own apartment and paying their own bills doesn't make them independent, unfortunately. So it's kind of difficult for a child to become that. And then, the hope is then the child's basically making very little or nothing, and that they would get, a bigger need-based aid. All right, so taxes, as long as you're not, unfortunately, the taxes are subject to what they call income phase outs. But there is an opportunity, American Opportunity Tax Credit. So that's $2,500 for each child in college. So when we use that term credit, it truly is a dollar for dollar offset against the tax that you owe, as opposed to a deduction. So if I'm in a 22% tax bracket, in order to get a $2,500 deduction, I need $10,000 or $12,000 of deductions to equal a $2,500 kind of a tax reduction or credit. So these are truly a credit that's offset dollar for dollar against tax you owe. So that's great. Now you've got to have the of course the expenses to offset that. And unfortunately, like if you're pulling out 529s and fully paying for that, unfortunately, they're not going to consider that, even though you had the expense. If you've used a tax-free withdrawal of the 529s, they don't allow you to double dip, basically. So you got to watch that. So let's say all you have left is $2,000 of expenses, and you pull it out of the 529 plan. Unfortunately, you'd miss out on the credit. So you got to watch that. So you got to watch the income phase outs. That could be an issue, and what's kind of considered an expense. All right. If you guys haven't heard of this this term before, there is what's called a net price calculator. As we said, it's kind of a tricky number because sometimes they'll include loans and that kind of a thing in there into their figures. But the net price calculator, it's on every college. It's on basically every university has it. And if you go out to that college board that we had mentioned, so you see that Big Future College Board, great site. You go out there, put your information in there. Also, collegedata.com is a pretty good site. So net price calculator is just that, kind of what you would expect to pay based on the information that you have. So we're going to look at a kind of a little example here between, and this is also something for us to just kind of realize that, I think sometimes our kids get in their minds, maybe a school that they really want to go to, maybe based on a name. I don't know, maybe Drexel because it's got a cool dragon. I don't know what would attract the difference between that. Who wants to go to New Jersey Institute of Technology? That's boring, right? So, but the cost differential is $55,000 to Drexel versus $33,000 and New Jersey Institute Tech. But really, what kind of a difference is there besides just the price that's there? So let's say my child wants to go to Drexel for engineering. So aerospace pays $71,000 and the New Jersey Institute of Tech pays $71,000. So sometimes it's helping our college bound children just to kind of think through, you know, is it really worth paying an extra $22,000 to go to Drexel? So, I mean, 22 grand differential, right? So over a 4-year period. So I'm going to end up paying $90,000 more to graduate from Drexel, and my pay isn't really, you know, all that much drastically different. So, you know, I think one of the I think that was one of our early slides. So our kids, just encourage our children to really cast a wide net. And it does take some homework. Unfortunately, it's, you know, it's going to take some homework to kind of figure out what the different costs are. And one of the other things that that kind of comes into play is merit-based versus need-based. And so this is kind of, this little slide here is references, if you guys remember what I was talking about, that a lot of the prestigious universities, so number one, very hard to get into. Secondly, some very expensive schools, but a lot of the prestigious universities, everyone's trying to get in there. So they're most likely to give financial aid or need-based aid, but unfortunately not a whole lot of merit awards. So if I'm a wealthy family and, you know, and I'm doing really good and I've got great grades and, you know, doing fabulous and I can get into Harvard, but if I don't need the aid, you know, a lot of times I'm going to pay full boat. So unfortunately, a lot of those schools don't give a lot of merit-based aid. So as we said, cast kind of a wide net for that. Just get creative in the schools and help your kids go visit a lot of places. You know, you may need to kind of cast that little bit of wider net. So I did not sign up for this, and one of the things they suggested here, I wasn't able to necessarily track down entirely, but so this is kind of the College Board's website out there, but you can type in the name of the school and you can click on the paying link, and so it'll take you right to the place that kind of gives. And then this is one of the things that I was not able to find. They said financial aid by the numbers. So I'm not sure if you sign up for this site, if you get access to maybe an extra screen or something like that. But so if you look up here at this financial aid by numbers, they're giving us an idea of what type of aid that's been distributed and how many kids actually receive that. And what was given out. So so this slide here that we're looking at is a slide of Yale. And so Yale doesn't give out a whole lot of merit scholarships. The non-need-based aid, so if you see that little red arrow there, non-need-based aid is 0. So that means that, you know, if we don't have a financial need or very low EFC, we're probably going to be paying full boat for the school that's there. So I did find there were these kind of things on just the site without having to sign up for it. So there were a few things that were there, but I didn't find this tab necessarily. So I'm assuming the slide is correct, but I just personally wasn't able to get in there and find this. But so it's an important thing to kind of figure out, though, is that, you know, what schools are giving you know, need versus merit-based aid. This slide here illustrates NYU typically provides poor financial aid and small merit award. So if you look at this 29,000 or this 37, the average need, NYU costs 78,000 to go to. So if I'm going to only get the average need-based aid is 37 minus 78, pretty big price tag there. So if you can kind of begin to get a feel for what's being offered, what's been given out, what the cost of the school is, and you can kind of figure out then, you know, typically kind of what you would have to pay for the college. This one here, this one provides, so in this example, you're going to see it. So it's a typical financial aid package, isn't quite as good as Yale, but does provide affluent, so much higher merit awards than NYU. So like many private colleges, Juniata does provide better merit-based aid. So you're going to find that some of the state schools that maybe aren't quite as prestigious, but have, you know, their average merit scholarship is in around that 29,000 level. And so again, just kind of the key takeaway here is figuring out merit versus need-based aid and kind of where you're going to fall in that range. So here's just kind of an idea of some of the grants. So I think I threw this in here just to give you guys kind of an idea of what some of the grants and that are available and out there. As we mentioned, Pell Grant's a very common one. The Federal Supplementary Education Opportunity up to 4,000, teacher assistance up to 4,000, Iraq or Afghanistan service. If you're in the service, you might be able to get some grants there. Loan programs. So there's a difference in loans in that the subsidized loan. So if you look at that under this interest rate, so it'd be the third column over, we see that 4.53. So there's a direct subsidized Stafford loan. So the difference here is, when does the interest, so student is not charged the interest while in school, so it's what we call deferred. But when they're out of school, then that's when they would begin paying the interest and begin having to pay. The direct unsubsidized Stafford loan, so you see that unsubsidized term. So it's the interest is going to accumulate while you're in school. So that does get added to that, and then when you get out, and then, you know, you can one of the things, you can always borrow as much as you need to get through school, whether that's a good plan or not. I guess maybe on one hand it gets you through school, but you can always get, so what's called the Direct Plus loans. Now those are for parents, or the Direct Plus for graduate or professional. Interest rate's a little bit higher, and but it's going to, you know, you're going to have to make the payments there while the kids are in school. So a little bit of differences there. And so grants and loans, of course, but and the different types. We kind of threw those in there. All right, so that's everything that we had to share with you guys tonight. Like I said, we didn't go really a lot into the savings, you know, like how do we save? But, you know, we're finding like most of our clients kind of are, hey, we're here at college time, you know, what kind of things do I got to watch out for? Or, you know, how do we navigate that? What do we look for? So most of our questions are kind of surrounding that. So if you can unmute yourself, you can, I think, just press your space bar, or if you need me to unmute you, if you have any questions, we'll try and answer them. So.
Dave.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I was very interested in what you were saying about divorced parents.
Yeah.
And that either parent can fill out the FAFSA, that it doesn't have to be the parent that claims the children on taxes. So do you have to submit something to prove custodial parent, or how does that work?
Yeah, and that's kind of I mean, I mentioned the mess. So
yes.
So unfortunately, I went through a divorce a couple years ago, and kids were living with mom for, you know, the majority of the time. So yeah, I mean, who fills out the FAFSA? I mean, you know, I would just, so so who fills that out doesn't necessarily, but it would be based on that custodial parent. And they did not ask any questions for that until I filled a form out wrong. And they, so yeah, I guess I should say that, yes, sometimes they will send you a form and they'll say, you know, who's living where and how, you know, give us the breakdown of what your your household looks like. And I incorrectly put like my information on there, and it took us like 9 months of worth of, they wanted every tax return, they wanted every certification, and we had to show proof. Like, you know, my son had to show his driver's license, and, you know, where was mail going to? Did it actually go to mom's address versus my address? And it just got into be a nightmare, because sometimes, you know, if I'm doing a lot of the financial stuff, which seems to make sense, you know, this is what I do. We were having a lot of the mail come here, and I was helping the kids through a lot of their financial stuff. So, you know, so it did generate a whole bunch of slew of just, you know, certify this, certify that. And they did want to take away some of our aid, which we're still kind of working through. So until I screwed up, they didn't really ask a lot. But, you know, then the school sometimes would send just a, hey, we're just checking, is all this information correct? Make sure you know what you're filling out on that form. So, you know, in a way, no, there wasn't anything that we initially had to do, but then they did come back and ask for some kind of certification. So
Then you did say they followed up with asking for tax returns and who claims the children.
yeah, and some of that just, but, you know, again, it's not supposed to make a difference on, you know, on who the custodial parent is, right? But I think it's just one of those things that, you know, like they ask us, you know, why is your son's address on his driver's license you know, my address? Why isn't it his mom's? You know, so again, I would just, it's one of those things to where after I went through it, it's making sure whoever the custodial parent is that is going to be filling out the FAFSA, I would just, you know, have mail go to their house, and, you know, just, you know, when they go to get a driver's license, you know, probably use the, you know, the custodial parent's address, and just in case that ever comes back, you know, the more things you have that are going to that custodial parent, the greater chance you have of being able to not raise any eyebrows or red flags. So,
okay.
yeah.
And then my second question would be, you talked about grandparents and whether or not they were contributing to paying for college or anything like that. If that's something that the grandparent pays directly to the parent and then the parent pays the tuition, is that a side way of getting out of having to claim any of that on the FAFSA?
Yeah, so just understand the questions that they're asking, and there's, there are, and if you think about it, there's, you know, in a way, I don't know, I mean, you know, you're not doing anything wrong, because if you think about it, parents can gift up to $15,000 per person per person in your family, right? So you know, with 2 children, and you've got 3, so that's 15. They can give you $45,000 per year, and that's a tax-free, you know, it's a tax-free gift, and they don't even have to put anything on their taxes. You don't have to put anything on your taxes. And so, you know, now it just becomes an asset of yours. But again, you know, if it's not in your bank account the day you file your tax or your FAFSA, it's not claimed. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's, you know, yeah, it's an end around a little bit of way around the system, but I mean, it is what it is. So yeah, as long as you're, I think it's a great way to do it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, do we have any other questions? I've got the chat open too, so if anybody has any questions, you can send through a chat. Okay. Yeah, and as we mentioned in the beginning, Allie will be sending out these slides. We'd also appreciate she'll send out a little survey if you guys don't mind sending that back to us. Very helpful and helping us kind of think through some things there. And pop out to our website. You've got my email address that's out there. Send us a message there, and or shoot us a question that you may have from later on. So with that, we will end our presentation. Everybody have a good evening and great rest of the week. So we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.